Okay, September 10, 2025. Maybe H.A. Wolfson covers the 2000 years of philosophy from Plato to Aristotle to Descartes and Spinoza, or 2500, 2000 years, no, yeah. And a bit of later philosophers, not simple, not simply a history of philosophy, but he gives the actual debates in metaphysics. After Spinoza, some major philosophers also arose. Adorno, 1903 to 1969, is a leading figure of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theology. I'm not aware of any prizes he won, but he created the Theodore W. Adorno Award, and one of his students, Jürgen Habermas, won the Adorno Award and won the Hegel Prize and many other awards. Adorno has his book Negative Dialectics. It contains three main figures of modern continental philosophy in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century, namely Kant, Hegel, and Heidegger. There are courses that were given by Adorno that were recently published, including Kant's Critique of Pure Reason and Introduction to Dialectics, which is on Hegel and ontology, and Dialectics, which is on Heidegger. Adorno is considered the chief critic of Heidegger. Really, Adorno also has a book based on a course on Aristotle called Metaphysics, Concepts and Problems. But these three courses help illustrate Adorno's complicated book, Negative Dialectics. Maybe they accomplish much more, since Negative Dialectics seems to consider Kant's Critique of Practical Reason, but it is the Critique of Pure Reason which is Kant's most important work. Should we add Jürgen Habermas' magnum opus, a book called The Theory of Communicative Action, which is in 2 volumes, 1981? Maybe include at least his book of 12 lectures called The Philosophical Discourse of Modernity from 1985, since it is also one of his major works. There is also a philosophy book in French written by over 450 contributors. Today, many textbooks are no longer written by one expert or a genius, but hundreds of experts. For example, a book on neurology is written by many experts, or a book on advanced mathematics is written by hundreds of experts. This two-volume book is called Dictionnaire des Philosophes. Translated, it is called Dictionary of Philosophers. It is from 1984. It is about 2,800 pages long, so it is more like 5 volumes or even 10 volumes long. It was translated into English, and there is also a second edition with 3,060 pages from 1993. Note: It may be good to read commentaries on difficult works by geniuses in philosophy or science or physics, etc., especially at first. But if you do that, or even read books of lectures by the geniuses, then you will never have time to read many books by geniuses, let alone all of them. Let alone if you sleep, have a job, have a family, engage in sports, need money to buy expensive luxuries, and have bad habits or hobbies. You would have to specialize much more. Though Moses Maimonides felt that commentaries on Aristotle were necessary, he had the extreme of human intellects. Averroes, Kant, Hegel, Darwin, and others also highly praised Aristotle, and he said that commentaries of Alexander of Aphrodisias, Themistius, and Averroes even went beyond the text of Aristotle. He said that he could not do better, but maybe he did do better in his Guide of the Perplexed. The commentaries of St. Thomas Aquinas were written about 70 years after Maimonides' Guide, September 8, 2025. Continental philosophy included many ideas, but mainly the philosophers Kant and Hegel. Well, maybe I'm contradicting myself here because I'm saying that uh, both of them, like someone said, both belong to continental philosophy. But really, I'm against. They one is for metaphysics, one against it. So Kant really may be part of analytic philosophy. Continental philosophy included many areas, but mainly the philosophers Kant and Hegel. Kant is considered the greatest modern philosopher. Kant rejected the ontological proof, which is very important in metaphysics, partly, for example, to prove the existence of God. Hegel tried to restore metaphysics after Kant's brutal attacks. He even called his book The Science of Logic, not metaphysics, because after Kant you could not write a book on metaphysics. In those days I did not even mention Hegel in my proofs yet. Kant alone was a lot to handle. I took a course and we covered from Kant, uh, Fichte, and Hegel and all those, but I mostly focused on Kant because even him, and, you need much more than one course just to cover him alone. So I didn't learn much about Hegel. Hegel praised St. Anselm for his proof, but he revised the ontological proof for making it dynamic instead of static. Well, this is also good. In this lecture, I'm adding more about Hegel, which I did not even mention Hegel in the 2017 Proof of God, which is based on freedom. And I mentioned Kant, but Hegel may be one of the greatest critics of Kant. Analytic Analytic philosophy was dominant, though there were philosophers like Charles Hartshorne who wrote on metaphysics and even accepted one of the ontological proofs of St. Anselm, saying that Kant was not even aware of the second proof of St. Anselm. Also, H.A. Wilson dedicated his whole life to expounding the 2,000 years of metaphysics in many huge volumes covering it from Plato and Aristotle to Descartes and Spinoza. Indeed, Bertrand Russell did a very popular history of Western philosophy. Well, it's huge, but it's one volume. He was one of the titans of analytic philosophy, and he's bold enough to strongly attack or criticize the geniuses Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, Kant and Hegel, among other geniuses. So maybe I was not maybe I was not accepted in the 20th century, but maybe I have good company. Russell was considered a major philosopher. I mean, he criticizes even these geniuses. Wow. He would criticize any continental philosopher because he's an analytic philosopher. And really, I was studying science in high school. They had no philosophy courses. I did not know anything about philosophy. There were no mention of the problems of free will, the immortality of the soul, and the existence of God. I only wanted to study the science of physics or maybe hardware or software engineering. But a relative of mine surprisingly got me interested in religion, and that led to philosophers like Moses Maimonides, who got me interested in metaphysics, which led to many other philosophers, especially Maimonides mentioned Aristotle. Spinoza believed that God was a substance that was eternal, that had infinite duration in time, had infinite attributes, each of which had infinite magnitude. Also, he was conceived through himself alone. For Aristotle to understand something meant to know its causes. There were 6 kinds of causes. Aristotle argued that free will and chance really reduced to the other 4 kinds of causes, namely material, formal, efficient, and or final cause. In ancient medieval times, many philosophers argued that God was eternal and simple. In other words, he was outside time, since he was immutable or unchanging. And he was infinite, but only in the sense that the concept of quantity did not apply to him. For Spinoza, God was free in the sense that he had an infinite intellect and infinite power. It was the only substance. We were modes and the attributes of the thought and extension. So we could not interfere in God's action. Kant considered the question of free will in Antimony 3 of his A Dialectic of Pure Reason. I saw two lectures recently on Kant, and the professor thinks that Kant actually proved free will in his later works. That's Professor Nichols. In the 20th century, Einstein and Born used the new mathematics to create major theories in physics. Spinoza really contradicted many great ancient medieval philosophers, since they held that potential infinite was possible, but not an actual or complete infinite, and an infinite magnitude was not possible. Even in the modern age, Kant held that a series outside time must be finite, since an argument must begin with premises and reach a conclusion. And in the Antimonies, he argued that we never know if a series in time ends or goes on to infinity. So that was the fallacy. Even Hegel may have rejected the complete infinite, since he replaced Spinoza's infinite substance with the absolute, and it seems that it was a potential infinite evolving in a dialectical manner. In the modern age, even the great mathematician Gauss rejected the idea of the actual or completed infinite, but I just heard two lectures on Cantor from the great courses. He was born in the 19th century and died in the 20th century. He argued that the actual infinite does exist. Mathematicians wanted Cantor to give examples of non-algebraic numbers. There were rare numbers like e or pi, which really were an infinite series, and also examples of other important complete infinite. But Spinoza's substance claims to be such a substance. In 1997, I tried to improve Spinoza's system by giving a better proof of the existence of substance. I later improved the proof. I also added hundreds of other proofs of the existence of God in various stages of completion. Spinoza also believed that humans gave an argument that the human soul is immortal. It should be added that Kant took free will, immortality of soul, and the existence of God as postulates in morality. Since the Critique of Pure Reason, he argued that we cannot prove these claims. Really, all of these involve the notion of the infinite, so Kant's conclusions may affect physics and metaphysics. Well, unless Professor Sean Nichols is right and Kant proved free will in later works, um, then immortality also follows, and so the existence of God also follows, because it goes together according to Kant. Even the question of the creation of the or eternity of the world of the Antimony 1 of the Dialectic of Pure Reason involves the question of a completed infinite. Maimonides said the creation of the world would be a proof that God exists. Even the eternity of the world was used to prove God's existence. Abraham saw God as the mover of the cosmos, since the universe needed a prime mover. Though Isaac Newton, argued that the force of gravity and the law of inertia were enough. That was in the modern age. And the question of the necessary existence, which may be God in Antimony 4, Moses and the other prophets saw God as a necessary existence, though Kant did not succeed there and continued a discussion of the necessary existence in the ideal of pure reason in the dialectic. As Aristotle said in terms, if terms in the sequence disappeared, then at least it is not an end. If, as Aristotle said, as Aristotle said, in terms of the sequence, if terms in the sequence disappear, then at least it doesn't, and then at least it's not actual infinite, so it may be possible.